I'd taken my intro to philosophy with Silvia Federici, which was actually about feminism, and also my entry year experience, which was with Kate Wininger, who is also a philosophy and women and gender studies professor. The next semester I took philosophy classes and women and gender studies classes, and eventually decided to double major. And then I decided to just major in women and gender studies.
I took a media and social change class with Professor Lockridge, and it made me think in ways I never thought before as far as, racial inequality and gender inequality.
I took consumer behavior with Johnny Chen in the business department 2 springs ago now, and that class was a perfect complement for women and gender studies because we talked about how gender and race and class affect what we buy.
Taking Women Gender Studies 101 with Lauren Carroll, that's when I sort of I really enjoyed it because it was mostly about reading people's personal experiences and sort of validating them on that level. Oh, that was just a really awesome class.
The class Women, Knowledge, and Power by far, I think, was one of the most influencing classes that I took in the Gender Studies department. I think it really changed the way that I viewed myself as a woman and viewed the history of women and the history of feminism.
When I took feminist theory with Lisa Walker, it was the first time that I developed my own identity as a feminist.
I learned that, that women have a very long, powerful history of resistance, and reclaiming a women's history became really important to me.
It was really liberating to be able to learn how to think for myself about feminist theory. In all the courses following that, I was able to take in the information that I was getting in a new way and filter through it in a way that resonated with me. So I'm very grateful for that course.
The sociology of gender class, we talked about really diverse kind of topics. It's kind of a holistic class to take. And also it's a pretty fun class too. I had a lot of fun. A lot of the discussions were really entertaining and interesting.
The class that I took that really changed things for me was Politics of Difference. It was this class where I just my identity sort of came together, and I started realizing all these things that I had never thought about before, and reading all these books that I loved all of them, and they really changed my perspective, and I really started to feel myself growing after that class.
It's hard to specify a favorite class because I've loved all my women and gender studies classes. I would certainly recommend to someone that they take Lorraine Carroll's seminar on witchcraft, which is just a phenomenal class, just an amazing experience. Absolutely loved it.
One of my favorite classes was Deepika's class that focused on the partition of India in 1947, and I had never had a class that was so specific to one event in history like that. And I felt all of a sudden like I was learning so much about one part of history that I had no other knowledge about. And it was amazing to me just to have that outside perspective of someone who was from India and who, could talk about it in a way that made it much more real.
The most memorable class for me at this point is my Arab Women Writers class. It was really cool to get perspectives from non-American, non-European on the world and what the changes in the world have really meant to everybody.
One of the classes that I thought was interesting was Wendy Chapkis's Sociology of the Body class. When people look at me, they make some assumptions based on my skin color and my hair, and actually in that class I was inspired to share a PowerPoint I created for a project for Love Your Body Day, in which I share my experience with my insecurities about my hair, and it kind of empowered me.
One of my favorites was definitely contemporary lesbian authors. It was just material that I had never worked with before. I don't know, it was material that I would not have been introduced to otherwise, and it really challenged me.
So a lot of the other classes I took related to linguistics, sociology, political science, And I was always amazed at how well they interacted with each other. And the stuff that I learned in women and gender studies classes, it was really applicable. It just feels really awesome to have that ability to see things from multiple ways, and allows you to recognize that the world is more colorful than we may think it to be. So.
One of the classes that I thought was the most interesting was a class on Eastern cultures and women in Eastern cultures, specifically veiling, and the idea of being covered, and I don't know, I kind of felt like I found myself in there. Even though I wasn't an Eastern woman and I didn't veil myself, I felt like I was covering who I was by the way that I dressed, or the makeup that I wore, or how I didn't present myself as being who I was. So those classes were really important.
You really can't go wrong with a Women in Gender Studies class. They're all good. I think, you know, I would recommend Deepika Maurya. Certainly Lorraine Carroll and Wendy Chapkus I've already mentioned. Susan Feiner is fabulous. I don't think you can go wrong.
I don't know if there's one particular class that I could recommend. I would just say that you should just definitely major and take them all, because there's not anyone that you won't like.